Hello, on this episode of the Average Lockdown Cast, we are going to be going for another trip down memory lane and looking at some roleplays. Hello, and so we're still in lockdown, it's still pandemic, we're still socially distant and isolated from each other, so you're going to live with this. All five of us are on for this podcast episode this evening. So we'll just quickly do a round of introduction so you get to know who we are and what we sound like if you're listening in audio only.
Hi, I'm Ben.
Hi there, I'm Ian.
I'm Gary.
I'm Lee.
And obviously I'm Sven. So tonight, because obviously we're running out of things to talk about, well, we're not. We're talking about too much.
Us.
If you watched or listened to the last week's episode 3, we did kind of go off on the mother of all tangents. So, in an effort to try and keep this on track of an actual topic of discussion tonight, we're going to be talking about role plays, RPGs, whatever you want to call them. At some point, nearly every gamer it probably has a go of a role play and has ones that they love, loathe. But we're going to be focusing tonight on what was the first one we played, what was our favourite. Obviously, some of us have got similar firsts, so we're going to skirt over that a bit, and we'll just kind of jump into maybe the next one that we played or the one that we claimed as ours. So
we talk about it together. What we like
yeah.
about that same thing.
So who wants to jump in first, Mr. Ian?
Go on then.
So start off with your first. What was the first one that you really played?
So I think the my very first roleplay that I ever took part in was Warhammer, Wifrip, and it was one of the best campaigns I think that's been done for that, and that certainly I've played across games, which was the Enemy Within campaign. Fantastic. Now at this point we only did a very little bit of it, because the first roleplay I really played was Vampire the Masquerade. So we did a few.
Cut your teeth, did you?
Oh, I know, mate. I know. It was at school, so we had like a started. Oh God, I missed that pun entirely. Stop it. So we played at school, and we had like a little group that did Wifrip to start with, and it was something. I mean, I did some of the Warhammer stuff, but I didn't really know what roleplay was. So we gave it a try, and after like 2 or 3 sessions, the teacher whose room we used, who's now like a good friend of mine, realized what we were doing and sort of introduced us to an older boys role playing game in Vampire.
Where's this going? This is the wrong chat for that, mate?
You can all get bollocks.
To be fair,
language.
To be fair, I can vouch for this man, and I mean, he is a good man. He's not one of those types. So I can vouch for him.
By my time at school.
Just when you left school, that's all.
I'm glad it's taken us less than 5 minutes to besmirch one of yours.
I know. It's how much of this you're going to be able to use by the time my segment's finished, Sven. You might be struggling. But no, and so it was. We did not play, and I know it was the kind of the trope. We did not play the mopey. Oh, everything's so down, and it's such a curse to be a vampire, and we've got to keep an eye on our humanity, and we've got to. We played as I think the Deacon Frost character in Blade at the time said we played. We just wanted to run around and be sort of naughty vampire gods and just play up all the abilities and just be frankly ridiculous. But it was a cracking system.
I'm going to fact check that because it wasn't Frost. It was the one who plays thingamabob.
Oh no, it was. You're right. It was his.
It's his second name. The one who's in Gotham is.
It is
the guy with the beard who loses his arm. I
I'm
can't remember the actor's name.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
You're exactly you're exactly right. It was as well.
You carry on, and I'll IMDb that.
I know. I was. That was my kind of initial introduction. So I mean, it's as I say, we did. I think it was. I want to say San Francisco by Night was the first game we played in, and I played a Gangrel stuntman straight out the back of the Gangrel clan book, and it was just a blast. There was no. It was the kind of ridiculous first roleplay experience where you did all the stuff that you'd never do in reality, but you did because you were playing a role playing game. So, you know, like diving out of windows and, you know, driving cars around ridiculously fast when you didn't really need to. All you were doing was going for the shopping.
So
in our role playing games, we went shopping.
So the fact
Have
check.
we lost Ben?
Have we lost Ben?
Oh, looks like he has dropped out. He'll come back, I'm sure.
Yeah.
If we just want to give him a second.
I think what's quite interesting what you're saying there is like, I've played Vampire, this is a system, but the one thing I find quite interesting is I thought that was quite a heavy little system, to be honest. To cut your teeth into was a new thing because there was always a huge emotional connection for people with Vampire. They either adored it and loved it with a background, but it was generally because of the people who were playing. It was always the goth contingent of the people in Middlesbrough who were playing, and they're all a bit more touchy-feely about it. It was all a bit ephemeral, you know.
We sorry, Gary, I'm cutting you off. Carry on, mate.
No, it's cool.
So we didn't because I played in kind of my final years at school, and it wasn't really the goth crowd. It was just kind of frankly, the roleplay nerds.
Yeah.
So none of us really had that teen angst going on.
Right.
So it literally what we didn't. We were just running around being vampires with cool abilities.
Yeah.
There was none of the sort of there was none of the sort of the tortured soul bit to it. It was just I'm going to race around, and it was kept fairly simple, the adventure we did, because well, we were a bunch of nerdy teens, and it was basically vampires running around fighting werewolves. But I liked there was a lot of the system that, looking back, you can go, oh, that was just real. That was edgy for the sake of being edgy.
Yeah.
When you looked at some of the different groups and the different like characters that were put into the clan books, they literally were just, oh, you're trying to be edgy there.
Yeah.
Am I back?
You're back now,
Ben.
Ben.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what happened there. Just everything cut out on the headphones. Just disappeared.
Yeah.
Don't know. Yeah, rubbish.
You
I'll
rolled
stay
the one.
quiet now.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yes.
So it was, and that was. I mean, I played Vampire for a good few years. I played sort of through my final year at school, and then sort of into my early university career, until I found other games. But I think we're going to touch on that later, aren't we?
Yeah. So just a fact check. The character was Quinn,
That's it.
played by Donald Logue, of course, or Donald Logue, or however you pronounce his name. IMDb doesn't give you pronunciations, but
Donald.
that's just.
He's in Gotham. Or he wasn't.
Yeah, he's in Gotham. That's to stop all of the
Did you do that bit?
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the average tabletop game.
3, 2, 1. You're back in the room. So that was your first one. So we'll go to Gary. Gary, your first roleplay game, either the one that introduced you to roleplay or the one that you kind of played the most first. You know what I mean?
I think I covered it on one of our previous forays when I was talking about what got me into gaming. I wanted to play role playing, but I also didn't want to get beat up at school. So kind of like I made my choice, and I'm okay with that. So I really wanted to play Warhammer Fantasy role play. I was reading through White Dwarves and looking at different adventures and scenarios and reviews in there, looking at things like Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium, looking at RuneQuest, looking at Elric, looking at all of those role-playing games that were out at that time. It was such a rich time for role-playing. D&D, believe it or not, was kind of like a bit blended into the background, but the first game that actually started properly role-playing, took part in an adventure, was AD&D 2nd edition. So I met a group of fellow nerds through Games Workshop in Middlesbrough, and I started regularly going to a gaming session on a Friday night. We also gamed every other Sunday, and it just became quite a regular occurrence. And I joined in quite late with a party of very advanced characters that were levels like 15 to 19. And I joined in and said, well, we'll start you off fairly, we'll advance you a little bit, we'll start you at level 5. And it was like, I was just there for the ride, basically. I was just watching them go and kick everything in while I was stood there going, I better stand back and let them do the stuff because they're amazing and I'm not. And I had to get used to Thaco and the intricacies of that. And I thought AD&D was a rich world, and I think the system was clunky as hell. It never sat well with me as a great system, because looking at something where I'm an elf with a dexterity of 19 in full plate mail armor, getting my dexterity bonus while wearing full plate mail armor, I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But still loved it. Loved the sessions and that group. We played loads of different role plays, but AD&D was the first one. Second Ed.
I've got a visitor. I don't know if you can see.
I've just seen here.
Yeah. So you're saying D&D and AD&D, especially AD&D, the worlds that were created for AD&D were so beautiful. Eberron, Dragonlance, Ravenloft, Forgotten Realms.
It was
Dark
the
Sun,
Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk. Greyhawk's still one of my favourite.
Of course, yeah. But yeah, the mechanics clunky, worlds brilliant.
Yeah, see, I love the AD&D mechanics. The thing that really it was kind of I'm kind of leading on because it appears as my favourite role-playing game. I think it's because it was getting me back into fantasy, and I just loved it. I loved the mechanics. I know they weren't smooth, but when it went to AD&D was second edition, then it went to third edition where they tried to percentile everything or D20 everything, didn't it?
So you had D&D, the 5 different boxes of D&D. Then you had AD&D. Then you had AD&D second. Then 3. Then 3.5. Then Pathfinder stepped off to the side from that when they did the open license. Then you had 4th Ed, which was when World of Warcraft hit, and they just went, we need to make a role-playing game that's World of Warcraft.
Yeah, the World of Warcraft world, which was terrible.
And now in 5th Ed, and I think 5th Ed is brilliant.
Yeah. I've been enjoying 5th Ed.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice. It's a really nice balance of D&D. So you still got the ridiculousness of D&D.
Yeah.
The fact that you are playing superhumans who constantly go around the world fighting other superhumans or superorcs or whatever. You know, these people with unbelievable abilities, just wailing on each other. It's great.
So was it first edition you put? Was it AD&D, Gary, or was it AD&D second edition?
AD&D second. It was the one. It was the hardback rulebook with it's dark blue around the edge of the book, and it's got a beigey kind of gold light where there's 2 cavalrymen bursting through. Which is a bit of an iconic piece of artwork.
Yeah, so
everyone knows it.
I flashed the player's handbook up on screen earlier when we first mentioned it there. I think
because D&D's iconic red box with the dragon on.
Hold on,
knows that.
I've got a picture of that.
Which I loved.
There we go.
Lee very
and the other 4 boxes, the other 4 coloured boxes that came as part of the D&D set as you advanced.
The
which Gary has.
Yeah, I've got one off Lee, which I'm much grateful for.
Wow.
And when you read it, it's
I've got the other 4 boxes as well.
It's gaming of a simpler time, but you know what? It bloody well works.
But you can see how, like, especially, I mean, we've touched on this before, but like, there's been such a resurgence in the last couple of years of role play, and I think AD&D seems to be that touch point where everyone who's getting into role play now, especially in lockdown, the amount of people I know from various different communities who are all of a sudden, you know, joining in AD&D campaigns.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's because I think 5th Ed...
It's an indoor hobby.
5th Ed kind of makes it so accessible to everyone, especially when you've got like Roll20 and D&D Beyond and all that.
Grounds, D&D Beyond, yeah.
Makes it so
Yeah,
easy to actually
yeah.
spin up a game and play it. I think you can see why AD&D is like kind of the gateway drug for a lot of people for roleplay. I mean,
Yeah.
technically the first roleplay I ever did, and I'm not counting this as my first because it was like a throwaway session where I got invited to this guy's house through a mutual friend, and I turned up and was literally handed a character, and I think it was a character straight out of a, like pretty much one of the archetypes, and it was just, here you go, play this, and I played for 2 hours and then went home, and then didn't role play again for 6 months or something. But yeah, like D&D was, or AD&D was like probably the first thing I actually played that you could be construed as a role play. But as I say, I only played for 2 hours, so it isn't in my first tonight.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, it kind of just going along with that Redbox and AD&D were pretty much at the same time for me. So Redbox, AD&D, and Traveller, all together, roughly the Traveller box set as well, which is a beautiful looking thing, black, red logo. But yeah, those were kind of, I was 10 going on 11 when I played those. And yeah, we've already spoken about them enough. I don't need to really go into them. But yeah, they were my number ones.
If anyone's listening or watching who hasn't checked it out, by all means, go check out D&D Beyond. It's a great way to dip your toe into that world and see what it's like. And I think that's one of the things that's got going for it now is its accessibility. I think they've really capitalised on the exposure they've had through Geek and Sundry and Critical Role, the appearance of like
Death
Joe
Saves.
Manganiello and Death Saves, and the people the cool people who've made playing the nerd game cool,
Well,
Stranger Things,
there was that comic relief stream on Friday, wasn't there? Last Friday.
Yeah.
Was there?
I don't know if you didn't. So
oh yes,
Nish Kumar and Sue Perkins and all them lot played D&D.
Yeah.
Sarah Pascoe as well, that one, yeah.
Yeah, there's a regular D&D game that some of the WWE wrestlers play. That's DM'd by Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
I was aware of that one, Brazzari, because I've heard that the Big Show's a big gamer.
He plays in the Joe Manganiello game.
Yeah.
With Vince Vaughn and Tom Morello.
It's a bit cooler than this group, isn't it?
And David Rice, the guy that did Game of Thrones. He's part of that group as well.
Oh, so that's going to end badly then.
It's so big. It's such a D&D it's kind of taking over the world. Bringing geeks to the fore.
Yeah. So I'm going to say it because Sven, you're not doing a great job of stopping us going down rabbit holes.
No, we're still doing fine. I'm watching that clock.
I stopped myself there.
So, who haven't we heard of from first? So, Lee, go on then, Lee. You'll have to obviously remember to unmute yourself. Lee is the disembodied hands again this week as he's painting away on his Thousand Suns.
No, he is just a pair of disembodied hands.
And here I am.
So, your first roleplay, or the first roleplay that you consider, the one that is your first.
Well, I got, like I said, just like yourself, I got invited to a D&D game, which was completely new to me, and off the back of that, because I went with a mutual friend of the Tabletops, Kel, we then brought you into it as well, if you remember, Stephen.
Oh, well, that was my proper intro. This is why I'm saying, I referenced this earlier.
It was West End Games Star Wars roleplay.
Nice.
And it was like, well, it's Star Wars, it's roleplay, and I got to be an X-Wing pilot, and I made this character, he was the best, honestly. Him, Wedge, Luke, that was the top 3 Rebel pilots. But considering 99, this is what you don't realise when you're first starting out these sort of things, that you're going to spend 99% of your time outside of the X-Wing with a blaster in your hand, and you ain't going to be in a jumpsuit. So you're like, So I had this guy, he could literally outfly Wedge Antilles, but he literally in a fight situation, he was like standing there with a gun going, so what do I do with this?
So this was, it was one of my first intros to a lot of the gaming was when, so this is when you had moved out of the family home, and your house that you shared with Graham on a Sunday night used to become, or a Sunday afternoon, used to become like Gamer Central. So we used to basically pile around there, and then there would be normally a little bit of wargaming in the afternoon. So normally some 40k again. So we talked about this last week. You know, my Valhallans and stuff like that. We'd play a little bit of 40k, and then we'd do the Star Wars role play, and we had like rotating DMs, and then people would leave, and whoever was left would basically sit in a circle and we'd play Magic, and that was like third ed Magic, I think it was, like Ice Age and
Heady time.
alliances and things like that.
All that crap.
So I can't remember because when we were obviously spoilers, we did discuss this a bit earlier, so I could get those graphics and that loaded up. And I couldn't remember. I remember that we definitely had second edition, and we had the second edition that was the revised and expanded edition. So second edition was the blue one with Darth Vader's helmet on the front.
Yeah, that's the one I was just looking up.
Revised and expanded was the one with Millennium Falcon getting chained. Well, it was the one.
Off 2 seconds.
It was the one that was getting chased by Millennium Falcon, chased by some what's its faces, TIE fighters. And then, so, as I was saying, so the second edition revised and expanded, which is what you've got there, Gary, is the one with the Millennium Falcon. And I think first ed, was that the red book with the black book with the red piping on it, or was that a different one?
It was
That's
like
the first
that.
ed one, yeah.
It had the film poster as the cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
I played second ed. Second ed and first ed, there wasn't much difference, to be honest.
No.
It
So
was
spelling
very-
mistakes were taken out. That was the difference.
Yeah, touch of cleaning up, nothing much. It was still
Yeah.
the core system, and everyone who played it loved it. It was beautifully simple, a little bit too simple, but it worked.
I mean, it always amazes me how similar our role-playing taste, in fact, because it was that second edition, the blue book with Darth Vader on it, was my introduction to, that was my first sci-fi roleplay that I did, and instantly loved it because it was a case of, so I roll a bucket of D6s, and that's, it was just brilliant.
Before I played that, I'd played Paranoia as a sci-fi role-playing game, which is
Kind of.
beautiful. Beautiful.
I've got a copy on my shelf.
Post-apocalyptic.
There's a re-release of that recently.
Well, I got
fastest
the
Star Trek.
humble bundle that off your recommendation, Ben, when I saw it that time. So I've got all the all the extra add-ons, the source books, that sort of stuff. So,
I think that's a good mention. It's a good mention, a humble bundle there, because if anyone wants to get access to role-playing games, it's a brilliant way to get
Superb.
the Pathfinder stuff, the workshop stuff they've done.
This week's the one they've done this week is every book for 4th edition champions.
Yeah.
Every book. Just
But bundle of holdings, another good one that you've put me on to.
Both good, and they both support charity as well, which I like. That's always nice.
Brilliant.
So we'll
some really good stuff there.
We'll shift back on track. The Star Wars roleplay, that was obviously, I used to like that one. That was my first one, and it was a great system as well. The D6s with the wild dice. That was one of those ones where, because it was my first foray into role playing, and it was probably the same with Lee.
Yeah.
And Lee will tell you, like the first one that Lee was running, because when I came into the campaign, I think they'd already been running it for a little while, and I joined in, and we were this rebel special forces team, and essentially we were just murder hobos. That's all it was. It was the classic, untouchable.
You were what, 15, 16?
That was about 18 maybe, 17, 18.
18, murder hobos. That's all roleplay is at that age.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is for me as a GM, because I remember when I was running that campaign at the time, and it was sort of like, I was coming up with all these intricate Star Wars things, and the way I'd wrote it, for whatever reason, I'd envisaged this beautiful sort of AT-AT base that were attacking an AT-AT base, and I just used the word gantry about 20 times in the description, so that was it for the rest of my life. To this day, Stephen will turn around and go, "Hey, see that Cirrus apparition? That's a lovely gantry, isn't it?" Like,
it was also where we found out that.
I was going to say about how do you take down an AT-AT? Well, I had loads of elaborate things they could have done with generators and power things. No, this lot, bag of thermal detonators, prime one, put it in the bag, drop it in the AT, off you go. cut the roleplay adventure down by about 2.5 hours.
So
Yeah, that's players for you.
it was so it's the Star Wars Second Ed was my first outing as a GM. And I had a lot of experiences with AT-ATs as well as a GM where I had to stop, and I ran quite a lot of adventures. It wasn't just every adventure wasn't just littered with them, but I had to stop putting them in my games because my players would see one and it'd just be, right, we're having that. And no matter what else was planned, they would see one and they'd nick it. And they were pretty good. They were pretty damn good at coming up with ways to do it. And it was very in keeping because my Star Wars was run as effectively the group was the A-team in Star Wars.
Well, that's what we were really like. We had
That's what every Star Wars game is.
one of the guys was the big fat. Literally his character description was big fat greasy trucker, and he had the minivan that we drove around in, and he was just a slob, and he was the mechanic, and then I was like a sniper, and we had a couple of close combat experts, and we had basically one of the lads, Paul, was playing, what you call it, out of Aliens.
Ripley.
No, not Ripley. No, not the one Vasquez. He's playing with like like an E-web on a gyro-stabilized mount on his waist, and we would just go around, like nothing phases. We'd go, oh look, there's Palpatine and a bunch of the Imperial Guard, and we'd go, okay, I draw my vibro blade. And then we switched over to Kel decided he was going to run it for a bit, just for a laugh. And essentially he put us up against, I think he was a Trandoshan bounty hunter, but he basically made the Predator. And it was one of those learning times in roleplay where it was you can't always win in a straight up fight. Sometimes you've just got to bug out and run away. And we were so stubborn and so cocksure of our characters that we were just like, nope, we must carry on, and yeah, we just got hammered. But that was a learning moment of you can actually die in a role play as a character, obviously.
Quick question then: have we all GM'd?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. More than in the last 10 years, more than I've played considerably.
Yeah. I've GM'd a fair bit. I prefer playing.
Likewise.
I prefer playing, but I don't mind GMing. But for GM, my biggest issue is I struggle to stick to. If you look at big scenarios, when you read through them, I found as a GM I was reading books which were really great, but players were never going to get to see half of it, even a quarter of it sometimes. Generally,
I don't mind that so much. I like the fact that there's all of this information there, and there's this background, and there's this world that's been written by somebody else. You utilise the bits that are appropriate, but you have all of this extra there. Like talking about the Enemy Within campaign that Steve brought up earlier. The single greatest written campaign for role-playing games ever. Without shadow of a doubt. I've played lots of pre-written stuff. Enemy Within is without doubt just the best. But the history and the amount of work that's gone into it that players never see.
Yeah.
It's massive. Have you ever run it? Yeah. So I've run it. I've run it 3 times now for different groups.
That's a big campaign.
Yeah. I mean, we've never finished it when I've run it because the groups are always collapsed or fallen apart or grown up or whatever. But you always, we always get at least through the first part.
Shadows over Bogenhafen.
Yeah, Bogenhafen.
So Ben, what's
group? Go on.
I was going to say, since you've got the floor, what's your first? Because I don't think we've done you yet, have we?
Oh, I did D&D.
Oh yeah, D&D. So
AD&D.
Is it just me then? It is, isn't it?
Yeah, just you.
All right. Sorry for breaking your flow there.
Good bit of getting us back on track there.
See?
I was well done, mate. Well done, I'm pleased.
Okay then. So
honestly, next week can we just talk about the Enemy Within campaign?
Yeah,
I'll be happy about that.
So as it was, obviously, I was just saying there, along with Lee, my first real exposure of playing was through Star Wars, so I didn't want to kind of repeat it. But the first role play that I thought was my first role play was Mutant Chronicles, the first edition Mutant Chronicles.
Get in.
And I mentioned this.
Is that the roleplay game based on that film with Ron Paul?
I will kill you. I will find you. I will hunt you down, and I will destroy you.
So
There's a bit of an in joke there.
Is it worth a watch?
I mentioned
No.
I mentioned this last week. You know, when we're talking about how easy it is to get a hold of stuff these days, and how back in the day you went to a convention, you got a load of mail order pamphlets. So we had been to, I think it was Parade Ground in Stockton, or Battleground, or whatever it's called these days.
Parade ground it used to
Yeah,
be.
Parade Ground. We've been to Parade Ground in Stockton, and I'd come back with these mail order catalogues for various different companies. And in the back of one of them, this photocopied A5 or A4 folded in half kind of pamphlet, there was the classic picture of McBride in his, not his freelancer outfit, probably in his
Blood
Bloodberry
His
outfit.
Blood Beret outfit.
I think it was him on the front of the book, isn't it?
Carrying a Mark IV aggressor.
Yeah, and and I had that photocopied picture, and it was basically coming soon. And I think they had the core rule book, and I think it was like 20 quid, like mail order. So
Artwork by Paul Bonham as well.
And I was about to say, the reason I love Mutant Chronicles only is the Paul Bonner artwork, which he's one of my favourite fantasy artists. Amazing work.
And I decided, because again, you know, we'd been doing a bit of role play, and I decided I wanted a system that I could run, that was my system to run. So I bought Mutant Chronicles, and I devoured that core book, just like, you know, cover to cover, made sure I knew it inside out. Bought all of the source books as they were coming out, and I just loved the setting of it. And there was a lot of it where you looked at it and you thought, you know what, there's a lot here borrowed from Games Workshop's IP, in the way, like the look and feel of some of the bits and that. But actually, you know, the world itself and the I know megacorps and stuff isn't a new concept, but the way they had kind of set them out just had something in there. And there was something about the system that I really liked, about the way that it held together. And again, I would love to go back and actually see the first edition rulebook again, and because I think they've changed it since, haven't they? With the
Yeah.
but they did
So
do
I
like
used to have the second edition, and I've got the third edition rule books, which have moved on to the 2D20 system that Star Trek uses.
But I think I loved the character generation system of Mutant Chronicles, where it was, you know, you're 16, and you basically go, you've got to work up through careers 2 years at a time until you got to where you wanted to be. So it meant, like, for a character to have one of the high level, like the really powerful,
Iconic.
like if you wanted to be anything to do with the Brotherhood, which were like the religious order types.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my mates he used to love doing these big cinematic campaigns, and he wanted to do a campaign that was essentially Resident Evil set in Mutant Chronicles, and he said, I want you all to be Brotherhood. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go for essentially like the Brotherhood sorcery psychery type, the Master of the Arts, as he was called. And it took me 7 goes to legitimately roll the character, because you had to get to about 50 to do it, which meant there was so many chances where it was one bad roll and you lost both your legs, which halved your movement or something, or your agility, which meant you then couldn't do the next career leap to get where you needed to be. But that just, so even before you'd got to play the game, you had a good idea of who your character was and where what route they'd come to get where they were.
I think the only system that I found that did that really well for me was the old Star Trek FASA system, because what you had to do is you had to choose your career, and almost like the age of your character was kind of determined by the system. You were rolling like D10s, and it's like you've done a couple of years in the Merchant Marine, you've done a couple of years in the Science Division, you've done 5 years in the military operations on the Romulan border, and all, and you ended up being like. And it was really nice because you had this diverse background for your character, and it influenced your skills and your attributes and what you did, and it gave you a real.
It was all stolen. Well, the first system that did it was Traveller.
Yeah,
Traveller had that character generation, and if like,
where you can famously die.
Die in character gen.
Yeah.
My very first Traveller character, that's what happened. In my first tour, at 16, you know, straight out of college, first tour, I think I was on a scout ship, died by the age of 18. And you sat there, I'm just like, what is this? What's going on? But yeah, Mutant Chronicles, any game where the weapons pages and weapons tables are as beautiful as they are, and you can have a 17 barrel chain gun and a shoulder-mounted grenade launcher that fires 5 shots a second at Mach 2, I may also have devoured the Mutant Chronicles rulebook.
It was, but so that was one where I think I only actually played in like 2 games, and I mean we played Mutant Chronicles a lot, but I used to GM it all, and
Yeah.
I got to the point like I developed a GMing style there, where I would essentially know who the characters were and what the end goal was, and everything else I would just kind of make up on the fly, which meant we did one of the campaigns that was in the I've totally gone blank. Who was the Japanese, like the Oriental themed
Mishima.
Mishima. I did a campaign there where I just said to the characters, you can make any character you want, except you, like whatever it is in your backstory somewhere, you have been wronged by a man that I called Sanpo the Triad King. And just that one name, because that was based on Sanpo the Pirate King from Project A, the Jackie Chan film,
Yeah.
just meant the entire game, every time they met a character, I was searching in the back of my mind for an appropriate character from a Jackie Chan film. The older the better. Which meant if they met the police, it was like the bungling boss-eyed policeman guy from like The Young Master or something like that. And I even did like the badly dubbed voices. So there was lots of like putting a thumb up and going, ha, see, and things like real bad dubbing. And I winged the entire game. And what was hilarious about that was the fact that Kel decided he was going to play the Shadow Walker that was like the Mishima ninja type.
Yep.
But he decided to have a character flaw that he was going to be mute. And
Wow.
And the whole point was he was in the first session when they all come together and bond over the fact they've got this this similar enemy, this common enemy. He was supposed to bond with one of the characters enough that he would establish some kind of communication style with them, and he would pass messages through them. We would work it all out in game. And what happened was he decided at the end of the first session that he didn't really like any of the other characters, and so he just hung around with them all. And because I was just winging things, they would go, all right, we'll investigate this, and I would throw some dates out of when, such and stuff would happen. And Kel hooked onto one of these dates that I'd given them, and while the rest of the party jumped on a shuttle and flew to Mars to get a hard drive decoded, Kel, with his little Shadow Walker ninja, went along and set up a perfect assassination of the bad guy. So when they came back from Mars, they were like, we've got the evidence to shut this guy down. And I was like, oh no, he got buried 3 weeks ago. And they're, oh. And it's because I'd given them this one plot point, and he was the only one that picked up on this. And he spent a week in between games writing out and showing me exactly how he would do it. I made him do a couple of rolls, and that was it, done. But I couldn't fault it because it was like I hadn't engineered the game to be here's Act 1, here's Act 2, here's the big finale. It was just, this is what's going to happen, and this is the way it's going to go.
I tend to GM and develop stories that way, whereby I've got a framework, and that's where I want people to go. I've got some NPCs generated for certain encounters and certain things I want to happen. I'll do a little bit of steering. I'll let the players take it where they want to, as much as I can, and kind of that works for me rather than a preset adventure. One of the things I always like to do is a little mechanic, was to make people feel a little bit guilty, to stop murder hoboing. I generally get them in some way involved in the killing, or someone dies as they've killed a good guy, and they've got to make good for it. And it generally puts people on track, and they're a bit more thoughtful in the decisions for the future. It works quite well.
So I've as I got a bit older, my technique for stopping the murder hoboing, just getting the police or the army involved and going, well, yeah, and people go, well, what's going on? And goes, well, you've literally just killed a bunch of people in the street. The police or the military or whatever of the era, they've like been told, and they're coming to get you. Because we'll take them on, okay, and you're tough, so you've done that. And then the next level, it was like an escalation in Grand Theft Auto, where the more people you killed, the worse the police got for you.
I think it's one of those where it's why I'll move us on a little bit here. I'll talk about my favourite system that I really like, and where that story comes from is Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, or WFRP, for the people who are in the know. And I loved Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, not purely because I worked for Games Workshop for many years before I started working for Games Workshop, reading through role-playing books and reading through White Dwarf magazines and Dragon magazines and review magazines. It was the one consistent game system where I loved the system. It was a percentile. It was easy to get to grips with. You can work, a percentile works for you. I am 70% good at something. You're thinking, I'm all right. I'm not bad.
Yeah.
You know, and it had a great common sense approach, but also liked the dark European world it was set within, but also exactly what you said there, Steph, is the law and order. You know, there was militia, there was road wardens, there was things you could bring in which brought order where you couldn't just go around. Because if I think D&D, you might think, oh, palace guards or something along with that kind of thing, but you don't think there's a structured law enforcement system in some shape, way, or form you could just bring in. And I like that about Warhammer. It had a really well-developed world. It's fantastic.
There was an established rule of law in some of my D&D games.
Yeah.
See, so I started saying it was kind of my very first roleplay as I was with it, and it started at, as we've talked about several times, it started with Shadows over Bogenhafen, and that was my introduction. Yeah. And 3 or 4 sessions in, we kind of, it had all been a crashing failure. You know, we'd let the big bad out at the end, and that's when we kind of deviated to Vampire. But I came back to it a lot later in my role-playing life, career, whatever you want to call it, and we did it again, and that's why I have such fond memories of that system. But bizarrely, one of the things that I always thought, as much as we talked AD&D is clunky, one of the things I always thought better was WFRP had too many stats.
Okay.
If you think about your stat block, you had a huge long stat block. You had, was it move, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, initiative, attack, leadership, willpower,
fellowship.
Yeah, and the thing is, that kind of detail though worked really well, because the way that the characters developed and the career system was fantastic, and it was one of those where it's like, I'm a sea captain now. You're like, have you bought a boat? Well, how are you a sea captain? You need to you had to get the trappings of the next career. And it was kind of like, whereas in D&D it was kind of like, well, I'm a huge level sorcerer now. How? Well, I just am. I've advanced, and there was no process to get there.
Mechanically, WFRP I always found very pleasing, because it was a one-roll system.
Yeah.
You want to try something, you know, whether it's a fight, no matter what it was, you just roll one set of dice, and that determines that whole action.
Yeah.
I dislike systems where you've got, and it's the same roll as well. You know, everything is the same percentile roll. I really dislike systems where you've got this type of roll for this action, this type of roll for this action, this type of roll for this action.
Yeah.
It's you know, that's really clunky, and I find that really ugly. Kind of when a system breaks down. But yeah, WFRP for that. And again, like I say, the world, the background, the
artwork,
the sense of lore, the artwork. It's what do you know?
So
what would you expect from a company that spent that long developing that world?
Yeah.
So I think I've owned 3 separate copies of the WFRP book. I've probably generated about 20 characters, and I don't think I've ever actually got round to playing a game of it. Something has always stopped us from playing a game. We've rolled the characters, and then we never got around to playing, or something happened, or... I mean...
I didn't rectify that after lockdown.
In the
Well,
early 2000s...
we did it last year, didn't we? We rolled characters last year for it, and then played Star Trek.
In the early 2000s, we did a thing, like our gaming group, me and Lee, we had the same kind of thing that we've been doing with like war games recently, where there was such an influx of role-playing games coming to the market that we would, chop and change between games. I mean, we had like some mainstays like D&D 3rd Ed. We played a lot, so we used to have like Sunday night gaming around at Lee's all the time, and that's basically everyone would converge to Lee's and get a takeaway, and then we'd normally do a bit of wargaming until everyone turned up, and then we'd do roleplay. And I say we would play like Mutant Chronicles a lot, we played D&D 3rd Ed a lot, but we used to like jump around, like, so we played Shadowrun, and it wasn't just like, we'd play it for like 6 weeks and then we'd never play Shadowrun again.
Yeah.
Or we'd play loads of Vampire and then we'd never play Vampire again. We'd move the Vampire off to a different night and we'd play that a different night with different people.
Yeah.
And we kind of did a lot of chopping and changing between systems.
Yeah.
And there were some great systems. Like, there's some systems that I would love to get again, like one of my favourite games ever. And again, I think it appealed to me and Kel a lot because, as I was saying before, with my love of Jackie Chan stuff, was the Hong Kong Action Theatre
I was
role-play
just
game.
thinking that weirdly.
Just the way that was set up. But if you were role-playing with a group that weren't really into the Hong Kong cinema stuff, then it was a little bit harder to play, so we played that for a couple of sessions. And I think that's why we did stuff like with Woofrup, where we'd roll characters up, and then probably the next week someone would turn up with a shiny new game, and we'd be like, all right, we'll roll up characters for that now, or we'd roll up characters, we'd play one session, something would go horribly long, like when we tried a Judge Dredd game, and the original character that I had rolled and the original character that Kel had rolled, something happened, and I think that was the night that we invented the term doogling, which is where in a role play you just, as a character, you just glaze over and you've got no idea what's going on, and you're essentially just standing there like open mouthed. And so that's when we tried to re-roll our characters, and me and Kel had Judge Ted and Judge Dougal, and we played the Judge Dredd game for like two sessions, and then that got boxed up and never touched again. And so I think that was one of the things we did in the early days that kind of meant that we saw a lot of games but didn't really invest a lot of time in some of them.
I don't think that's too uncommon though. I've played around 12 role-playing systems, at least.
Oh, off the top of my head, 40 or 50.
Wow.
Easily. All of the White Wolf games, D&D, various different Star Treks, Cthulhu. But kind of leads into, this will lead nicely into my favourite game actually. I've done a huge amount of different games. Shadowrun, Legend of the Five Rings, Judge Dredd, as Sven was saying. But the one that always appealed to me and caught me and really I found a real kinship to was Cyberpunk 2020.
Yeah. Played that a few times.
Started off with 2013, and then 2020 came out. And it's not quite the dystopian joy that game decided the year 2020 would be. It's not quite turned out the same.
Have we got more pandemics?
We've got one or two more pandemics.
The future's a lot more bleak here.
The beauty, what I really liked about Cyberpunk was that it had that, the character generation again had that life path thing, so you could really affect who you grew up to be and who you played. But with the addition of cyberware and bioware and money, you could play anybody and be anything within this dystopian future. But it was also horrifically brutal, and a gunfights were lethal. In fact, any fight was lethal. You pick the dice up, and it's 50-50 if you're walking out of a fight, no matter how good you are.
Yeah, I've played in Cyberpunk sessions where someone's character's died because they've been an idiot, and they spend the next 30 minutes of the session rolling a new character while the rest of us are getting on with it. And then the DM drops this new character in, and that was not an uncommon experience.
Yeah. It was very common. I was really lucky that the guy that I spent a lot of time playing Cyberpunk with, my mate Ridley, who lives out in the States now, he is a writer as well, and he writes cyberpunk novels and short stories, and he actually wrote the short story of the games that he ran with us in. And they're available online, and we'll try and put a linky down there for anybody that's interested in some really, really good cyberpunk stories. The year of the rat and boy, things like this. But we had the one session I remember. There was a guy playing with us called Wayne, and he ended up being known as the accelerator because he went from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. He found one of this thing in one of the Chrome books, which was a nerve toxin grenade, and he showed it to Ridley, the GM, and said, "Look, I want to buy some of these." And Ridley was kind of half in and half out of doing stuff, so he was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that looks, it's a bit difficult to get hold of, but yeah, you can have it." And we had this job to go and take somebody out in a nightclub, so we'd come up with this really convoluted plan involving EMP grenades, and we were going after a booster gang. That was it. We had to take the leader out, so we had EMP grenades and all this kind of stuff. We were going to, throw the EMPs in and then go in and take this one guy out and then sneak out. But we get to the door of this club, and Wayne's just like, "Screw the plan. I'm just going to throw one of these grenades in." We're like, "All right, what's that do?" And we looked at it, and it was affected something like 300 square feet. It was a save against death or take 4d10 damage.
It's a lot of dead clubbers.
Just this club was just, it was 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. It's just, and then there was another guy called John, and he ended up playing Cyberpunk because he used to get shit faced. Sorry, he used to get very, very drunk on cider whilst playing Cyberpunk. Yeah, that was always an interesting combination.
Cyberpunk. Carry on, sorry, mate.
Go on. No, go on.
Okay, Cyberpunk is a game I've never played.
I've played it 2-3 times at least.
Really wanted. I've got all the books. As in, I bought. It was. I looked at them and went, "This just looks so good," and it just like. The one thing I've heard about it was if you got a group who, what could happen with it, and I'm interested in your taking it. What could happen with it is, you could end up doing a lot of little solo things in a bigger group. So like the Jacker would go and do his net thing, and the Mage would go and do their Astral thing, and the Street Samurai would go and just cut things up.
There's no mages.
That's
None of that kind of stuff. That's Shadowrun you're thinking of.
Another brilliant game system.
It is Shadowrun I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Shadowrun was the one where it was like D&D, cyber D&D, wasn't it? Because you had like elves and mages and
dragons and I played an interesting game of Shadowrun once where.
So I never played Shadowrun either.
Cryogenically frozen, and then gone through the change. It was that was odd. But no, Cyberpunk is our world in a dystopian future without magic. But with horrifically big guns and cyberware.
And 2019 Cyberpunk 2099 computer game coming out soon.
27/7.
27/7. Oh, okay.
On all platforms.
Yeah, but so they've just done. They're releasing a role-play game to go with it, to go alongside it. Cyberpunk Red. So I picked up the box set Kickstarter, jump starter for that. And they've done a couple of nice, interesting things to kind of, because of the problem with, as you're saying, people going off and doing their own thing. So riggers and jackers would go off and do their own thing, kind of be away from it. So they've gone from web space to augmented reality. So the internet is now an augmented reality overlay. So the jacker can react and be with the group and do things there and then in a different headspace.
I think it also starkly shows, for me, what I learned was how different groups of people approach role playing, and who you play with will define how great your sessions are. You can play with an average DM with some really good players and it makes it great. And you can play with a great DM and some terrible players, and it's still not a bad game. But my God, it only takes a handful of bad players to really, truly ruin a game. And I think that's what happened with Cyberpunk for me. Like I said, there was a guy who was just on an endless cycle of rolling up characters while the rest of us were getting on with stuff. Because he was doing stupid murder hobo things and going around just weird laced, always picking characters that were out to spoil a fight, always kind of like antagonists and protagonists. It was ridiculous. But the counterpoint to that is I played Shadowrun, which is a slightly more a Disney version of Cyberpunk, if you like. It's a bit more light, but still a brilliant world. Still had a lot of that, a lot of things that Cyberpunk wanted, but pitched in a different way. But the people I played with made that an amazing. And I played a lot of Shadowrun, whereas the 3 Cyberpunk campaigns I was part of all dissolved quite quickly.
So the one I really wanted to play, and we had it, but the system was horrible. Just the world was great though, with Slay Industries.
Oh,
which
superb.
Just the world and the character build and the options in that, and just the backstory. It was just spectacular. I loved it, but
I've still got that.
We couldn't play it. As in, I've got digital copies of it now, but we couldn't play it. As in, literally, you got to combat, and it was like it was like
it made no sense, did it?
None whatsoever. There was no sort of go from A to B to C to D to E. You know, it was like, well, check what this is, and if this is this, then try and do that, and it just felt like there was some sort of flow chart. Oh, it was awful.
Did you ever look at a game called Edge of the Sword?
No, never heard of it.
So this was a game that released the combat rules first, and it was one book, which was the gun book, and combat was basically you roll to hit, taking in every possible variation, so range, wind speed, wind direction, elevation, etc., etc. Then you'd roll. Then you see how far the bullet penetrated, depending on caliber, what it was firing against, and then you had blood trauma and blunt trauma and injury trauma based per inch of penetration.
Jeez,
good lord,
that sounds awful.
Yeah.
It was a really nice gun book, and they actually put and the gun book they did, which was all modern firearms at the time, they did put stat blocks in for every other roleplay game as well. So that's why we bought it. We bought it as a reference for Cyberpunk. But it had Shadowrun, Cyberpunk, Twilight 2000, etc., etc.
Okay, so
right, get us back on track.
Yeah, we're moving on. So let's go back to Lee, because Lee's been quiet for a bit. His hands are still there, so we know he's still there, and a cup of tea's appeared, so we know that he's still moving. So Lee, we're gonna go to your favourite role play.
I didn't know there was going to be a test. Now, my favourite role play, I would have to say, was the Star Wars. I think mainly because it was the most successful one we had, but it was just the fact that it was also new, it was also fresh. We had a lot of fun playing it, you know.
It was Star Wars, which is always a big draw.
It was a bit of a tough because it was like D&D. I played so many times, so pretty much the same character every single time because it's just the way I go: Ranger, Elf, or something like that. Guy in the woods, Strider. Yeah, remember. But with Star Wars, it gave us an opportunity to play different role players, and obviously back then it was just like, I want to be the best pilot. No, that didn't work. I want to be the best gunslinger. No, that didn't work. I just want to be your all-rounder, you know? So, yeah, I would have to say Star Wars.
What about Murphy's World? Just getting you back onto the image that I've got loaded up.
Do you know, I completely forgot about that, and that is an outstanding little one for its own merits. I GM'd this. I bought this book called Murphy's World.
So there's a pic on screen now.
Yeah. Excuse me. The concept behind the game is, it was at the time that the company who did Toon and a lot of open source games where you could bring your own sort of content to a gaming system or place, you know, okay? And the idea behind it was that anybody in the world could just appear in Murphy's World because it was a place of portals. So my first game was with the first roleplay group I ever got involved with, and we had a friend of ours called Paul. Stephen will remember him as well, who was he's a character in real life as well as he plays his characters. He was a character called Hugh Blue, and he was heavily influenced at the time by a TV show that was very popular at the time, which was The X-Files. So he was playing this FBI agent. Kel was involved, and he just read Heir to the Empire. So he was a Nogri Death Commando from Star Wars.
Can I just quickly ask, was there an X-Files role-playing game? I seem to remember one.
There was a couple. There was
Yeah.
X-Files and there was
There's two, yeah.
Conspiracy Theory X as well.
So
Yeah.
basically, we had this hodgepodge of different characters that had just appeared and pulled into Murphy's World, which is a world discovered by a space explorer called Murphy. And it's a magical world where basically consensus and belief are the ultimate power. So if you go, is that somebody coming towards us over there? And then everybody starts looking and starts singing, out here I can see somebody coming. Somebody will approach you, you know. So the first time they learned about Murphy's World was what had happened is they appeared. The FBI agent had this big stretched Cadillac with an open roof, and he was driving along, and all of a sudden he just appeared in this desert on Murphy's World.
Very undercover.
Nogri Death Commando dropped out of a portal. He was just about to be killed by a bookie. He just fell through. And all these other characters fell into the same place. The best one was a guy called Andy who created this Mexican lich jaw wrestler who was in full outfit, and Andy was just I mean, the best way to describe Andy's characters is they're fabulous, just as in every sense. And Andy's a brilliant role player. And you had these characters, eventually they came to the consensus, look, they're in the middle of the desert, they have a vehicle, let us try and find a town and work out what's going on. Now, they'd been driving for 3 hours, and I kind of said, yes, you're driving through the desert, you can see settlements and stuff off in the head. And then I said to Paul's character, don't you think you've been travelling a long time without petrol? And he looked down at the gas gauge and realised, yes, I should have filled up about 100 miles back. Now, the problem with Murphy's World is the car had kept going because it was just going because Murphy's World willed it. But as soon as he had pointed this out to somebody else in the party, the disbelief came in and the car immediately ran out of fuel in the middle of the desert. And that's how Murphy's World worked. And it had this beautiful map in the book where, you know, places like were described as this is the territory out where the buses don't run. And we had all these fantastic adventures where we just brought in facets where we actually had like a Babylon 5-esque battle, but it wasn't starships fighting each other. It was shopping malls, and it was superstores going up on a supermarket, and it was just weird things like that, and it was funny and hilarious. We even made up our own brand of chain store. There was Karuski Fried Platypus, which was like the branded store. We went to a town, there was always a KFP in town.
Well, you did because I wasn't playing on this one, and this is you basically got me. You were telling me about basically a Royal Rumble wrestling match that was going to happen.
Yes.
And
yes.
you asked me to help you come up with some wrestling, like some wrestlers that could be like
That's
main
when
event
you joined
wrestlers.
in, isn't it?
I didn't even play Murphy's World. I just remember suggesting, like, helping you write silly wrestlers and things. And so we were coming up with all these wrestlers, you know, like going, oh well, there's the dishwasher, and he's just a wrestler. He's got rubber gloves and he's got like one of those mop on a stick things. And my favourite one was the undefeated champion of the Murphy's World Wrestling, which is JCB Dan, which was just a guy in a JCB, so he could never be pitched over the rope, he could never be pinned. And
I mean, even things like the characters. It was a comedy. If you ever have a chance to play it, just read. It's amazing. It's a great book. But even Kel, who tried to make this serious Death Commando Nogri from Star Wars, this, you know, a lot of Star Wars nerds will know what I'm talking about. But he ended up having a horse, but the horse became a character in its own right. That actually, when Kel comically went into some sort of ninja outfit to blend into the background, the horse did as well. So he had the horse to be creeping along like this, you know what I mean? Like, and it got to the point where his elaborate hits, like as Keller is known to do, as we'll probably discuss a lot tonight, even involved the horse as the second bowman or shuriken thrower. So him and his horse were literally a one-man, one horse killing machine. But yeah, we had a lot of fun with Murphy's World, and it's something I've been desperate to try and find. I think I got rid of my copy years ago because it just got wrecked, but probably could do with another copy at some point in the future.
so, yeah.
Stunned, lads.
Hello?
You know
I'm here. Are you still there?
Yeah.
So
No, no.
what you mate, so
I was just trying to work out who we haven't heard from a favourite. So we'll go Ian next. You've been nominated.
Did you say me there? Sorry.
Yes.
I was when Lee said Heir to the Empire, I started looking, going, oh, buddy, I've forgotten about that. And then I found a YouTube of what looks like fan films of it. I started watching them. So,
Wow.
so my
Thanks, mate.
well, listen, I'm doing a lot of things because I was originally thinking, I'm sure it wasn't Heir to the Empire. I'm sure it was the Thrawn trilogy, and the Thrawn trilogy was Heir to the Empire was part of the Thrawn trilogy.
yeah.
Wow. I think you'll find.
Much in the same way that when Gary earlier on talking about AD&D said, it was really strange that you could wear all this armor and your dexterity still counted. And went, I'm sure that's not correct. So I went and started looking through the digital copies of the books I've got. And went,
Jack, why do we hang out with this guy?
We need someone to read the rules.
I was going to say I'm the guy who helps you play your games properly. So my favourite coming back to something we've already discussed. My favourite role-playing game is still AD&D Second Edition.
Wow. Okay.
I thought it was
Old school.
It was just brilliant. It was. I think it was. It had all the fancy joy that from Warhammer and Wifrip, but with bizarrely a less clunky. And I know obviously you said it was quite clunky. A less clunky system, and I guess it's a style choice as well. Obviously, Ben, you've mentioned that one of the reasons you like Wifrip is it was just here is the dice I roll, and that kind of covers everything.
Yeah.
I really like I need a D20 for this, and I need a D6 for these weapons, and I need a D8 for these weapons, and I need a D4 for my knives. I really like that variety and having all the different dice to do different things.
Yeah, I don't mind the different dice for weapon effects. What I mean is by system mechanic, where the combat roll is the same as a skill roll, is the same as a spell roll, is the same. You use that same mechanic for those.
Yeah.
I don't mind having different weapon effects or different, damage effects of different dice, but the core mechanic is the same.
Yeah, understood. But and I don't know. I think there's elements of the roleplay group that there's probably more connections that I make with the game as well. That the reason it's my favourite is it's that the roleplay group we still play with today is the one that I got started in playing AD&D, and we went on like some fantastic years and years of my entire 4 years of university where we're playing one campaign weekly or fortnightly, and just it was one of those truly Lord of the Rings scale epics that you've got all the different tales of it, and it was just I loved everything. The books, those classic AD&D books of the Second Ed, which was the black border.
Yeah.
With it's not the dragon, is it? It's the where is it? The dragon? Whatever. It's the black. The three books.
Second Ed was blue border.
Is it?
Yeah, yes. Gary
So
said
Monster Manual, Monster Manual, DMG, and the PH.
Yeah.
all that.
They all had like the black.
They were clambering up like a rock. It was a brown, rocky scree slope. I forget what they were being attacked by, but there's adventures climbing up something and getting attacked by something on a Monster Manual. But the AD&D player book was definitely the cavalry coming through, and they were in kind of like a beige colour. And it was a very dark.
But it was a black spine on the book.
Yeah. Yes, it was black spine.
Well, I've got 2 or 3 copies of the Player's Handbook and the DM's Guide and stuff for Second Ed here because when it was one of our friends who DMs our current campaign, he was moving away with his job, and so we went to the army base where he was stationed for a weekend, and the weekend was meant to be, we're going to drink lots, and we're gonna because he was down based in Bedfordshire, we're gonna jump on the train down to London and go clubbing and all this kind of stuff. And we got there on the Friday and we were just sitting chatting, and someone said, we've got a couple of hours tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon before we go clubbing and that, should we just quickly spin up a throwaway D&D game? And
yeah, that's right, that's what
we spun up this D&D game, and it sort of kick-started that campaign again. And over the next few years, it went from being Second Ed completely second at D&D, with the only tweaks being like the character generation mechanic and stuff like that. We do a much more narrative mechanic, and the skill choices were different. We didn't use the normal skill tables for picking what skills you could do. It was more narrative, like when you select them.
Like,
Sorry,
I think that's the other reason I've got such a fond connection to AD&D is it was the system that spawned us starting building our own system, which is what you're kind of touching on there.
Yeah, and so, like, over the next few years, so when our friend Russell went out to the Emirates, where there was there wasn't really any role-playing scene when he went out there. The only role-playing was that, there was the expats that were out there that would play, but there was no, like, they would just basically would play on where they were in their houses. And he kind of got together with a few people and started like a golf role-playing community out there. And he got a few games going out there, and his game, and with us as well, because me and Ian were still playing here, just the two of us. We slowly moved away from actually using the AD&D rules to, as we replaced bits that we didn't like or that we wanted to change with house rules, it eventually went where those books just got thrown out, and there's literally like a couple of like place names or a couple of tiny markers left that it's actually D&D anymore.
Yeah. And I've just been looking, because I was and I thought this at the time, the books you were describing as the AD&D books are not the ones I remember. So I think looking at what I've been doing here, I had the revised editions. So I had AD&D Second Ed revised edition, which was black.
The black ones with the dark pictures on the front.
Yeah. Well, so you had like a barbarian hoofing a door in with a ranger behind him on the PH.
Yeah.
You had 3 ogres coming towards you out of the book on the DMG, and the Monsters Manual was white. It was sort of your classic dragon, beholder, some undead thing, a minotaur cover. It was
Yeah.
So I still love the fantasy roleplay first edition cover with what looked like the traditional party. It's the party that's in the example game in the book, the example scenario you get in the book. It's a troll slayer. It's a human wizard. It was just epic.
I think you'll find that they are the same figures that have been on the cover of every edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I don't think I've played any game of that where someone hasn't looked at that cover and gone, see that big spiked chain fist that the ogre's wearing? I'd really like one of those for my character.
Well, you need to be a pit fighter. You could have one.
So moving...
And be an ogre, which you couldn't be.
Moving swiftly on, trying to shunt this back onto the tracks, before everyone disappears. So
I do have an additional question to ask on this subject after you've done your bit.
Okay, well, I was going to say I'll do my favourite, and then is it just Gary to go?
No, I've already said.
Gary did. Must just be me then. So,
it off, mate.
To finish with like the topic of discussion, my favourite roleplay is, and it took a bit of thinking about this, but it's Deadlands. And again, I've mentioned this recently at some point because I think it was on episode 1 of the Lockdown Cast, because I've recently gotten copies of all the books again, courtesy of some Imperial armor trading, which is different from Joan armor trading. I apologise for that. So yeah, I mean, Deadlands was another one of those games where, as I said, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when me and Lee had our regular roleplay sessions, and it seemed like everyone wanted to run out and buy roleplayers or try different roleplayers and find one that was their roleplay. And at the time, we were primarily, I think, we were playing. So we had games of like the World of Darkness stuff going on. So vampire, werewolf. What were the other ones that they had?
Mage.
The mage, yeah. There was all those ones. Wraith, yeah. So we through like the 2 or 3 roleplay groups I was in, we basically played through all of those kind of things to some degree of success. And then we were playing our D&D Third Ed and all sorts of other things that had come and that were getting thrown in. And I went to, I think it was probably Forbidden Planet, and in their little downstairs roleplay section, which Gary is very, very familiar with, having been
Worked in it.
having been the
Ran it.
caretaker in that room for quite a while.
I was more like Ook from Discworld into that basement.
So
Arp.
I just remember going in, and the thing with those Deadlands books were they were such a bright and vivid yellow and orange
Yeah.
that they kind of they sprang out the shelf. And so I remember seeing like they had the first the core book and the player's handbook, and then probably it was like Hucksters and Hexes. And this was at the time where I think I had an all right job, so I was quite loose with cash. So when it came to buying roleplay books and gaming stuff, you know, it was all right. I'll buy those three books because they look really interesting. And then I think I went back to Forbidden Planet like every month and bought the rest of the collection. And again, I just loved everything about Deadlands. There was everything about it was themed so well. You know, even just the backstory itself that drew you. And it's like everyone knows Wild West, and Lee will tell you that in our household, you grew up watching cowboy films or war films. And my dad is like a big. He loves all the Wild West. He loves all the cowboy songs. So we've been brought up steeped in, say, like cowboy flicks and John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart and all that kind of stuff, like ranging the plains. And so seeing a cowboy themed or a Wild West themed roleplay that wasn't just Wild West, it wasn't Gunsmoke, really appealed. And then you got in all the extra mechanics, like when the Hucksters, when they were using when they wanted to use their powers, rather than just being a spell thing and going, I roll me 3d8 or me d20s or whatever and I cast me spell, I've got success. The whole thing of having to load up a poker hand and actually playing your poker hand depended on, it would give you successes, but it could also backfire on you. So you could go, well, I'll draw a 15 card poker hand, guaranteed to get a straight flush or something. But actually you've got more chance of blowing yourself up with a demon. And the fact that there was all these nice little mechanics that tied into not just the way the game played, but the feel of the game. So, you know, the fact that you used poker chips. So I remember going and trying to find a box of coloured poker chips, different colours to use for the experience chips and stuff that you had, yeah. And again, there was so much in there. And again, because of the group of players that we had, there was so much variety that if someone wanted, like Lee, as he said before, you know, Lee traditionally will play Johnny Lowdog. He will play the guy in the white suit who's gonna come in and make everything right. That's generally Lee's character.
You poor little sheep ranchers.
See, and then but he could do that, and then the people who like the funny mystic stuff could be a huckster, and someone who liked big gadgets and big guns could be the mad scientist. And then even when one of our friends took over GMing it so that I could play a game, it was not long after I bought I forget the expansion that basically had Shan Fan, which had the rules for martial artists. And so I was able to create the Jet Li character Wong Fei Hong from Once Upon a Time in China in America. So I had this kind of like, I had essentially this Jet Li character running around doing these ridiculous martial arts moves. And so it kind of had such a wide appeal to, it meant everyone in our gaming group could find a kind of character that they liked. So one of the people in our group used to always play like demure women who looked very, basically they were like sex kittens with a hand cannon. That was the kind of, and so he could play a saloon gal who, you know, would basically flounce around in a corset and a bustier, and then every now and then whip out a great big derringer and blow someone's face off. And
soiled dove.
Yeah. And so there was so much variety in the game. I think it really appealed.
Your sex tape.
And it's one of those things. It's one of those regrets that I had that when we stopped role playing, we basically stopped role playing for a good while, and I just had all of these books sitting there doing nothing, and I was trying to raise some money for something, and I sold them all. I sold the entire set of Deadlands books. The only thing I've got remaining from my original set is I've still got the original Deadlands poker decks.
Oh,
But I sold everything else. But luckily I've got most of the books back now, and I'm slowly rebuilding the collection of what I'm missing. I mean, I've got them all on PDF because of one of the recent Humble bundles, I think it was, that had a lot of them. And I know there's been a few different variations of it with, like, the Savage Worlds and the Deadlands D20 and stuff like that, but I still like that original system, the first Dead.
I don't think it was a Savage. There was one that was done last year, wasn't there, that they did over Kickstarter?
just this finished last week. There's one.
Was it just finished last week? It must have started late last year, did it?
Well, they did one last year as well.
Yeah.
They did a Humble bundle last year.
Yeah.
There was a Humble bundle last year and the Kickstarter.
Yeah, and they kickstarted a new version, a reissue, redesign that finished last week.
Because Deadlands is one of those games where I had never heard about it until we started talking about it, Sven, as in a long time ago now. But it's that kind of game that probably for exactly the same reasons you are. I mean, I'm a huge fan of westerns, as is my dad, and that's kind of, I was brought up with Dad watching those, and I think they're brilliant, and like from the classic sort of Eastwood and John Wayne's right up to the more modern stuff that's coming out, which I think actually is great.
Yeah.
But like Deadlands is a game I would love to put every time. I mean, I've read all the books. I think I got all those Humble bundles. I've been through the number of times I've looked and gone, I'll be. Is it the Indian, the Native American Skinwalker?
Spirit Walkers.
Spirit Walker. And just looking at the different options and what you can play, and the engine, the mad scientist. There's just so. It's one of those games where I look at I build the character and go, this is what I'd like to play this week, or next week it'll be something different. But
so I never played the Western version, but I did play the post-apocalyptic.
Was that the Weird West, or whatever it was called?
Weird West.
Wasted
West was the apocalypse. That was the green books.
Yeah, the green books. And the game we played was set in England, and we were a group sent out from because it was after the flood and all the badness had happened, and we were sent out to scout this new world using the waterways of England and the new waterways of England. And so we had a canal boat. And it was just this group of murder hobos on a canal boat, just traipsing around England, meeting crazy cannibal cults and the Gang of the North, or the Cult of the North, which was this group of children and we worked out they were somewhere near Watford, because on the M1 there's this
the North,
the road sign that says the North.
Yeah.
No, Watford itself. On the M1, there's that big road sign that just points to the north, and that was all that there was in their area, and that's what they worshipped, was the north, because they didn't know. So it was just we had one of the characters was a pirate who had a jet ski that could shoot out the front of the canal boat, and we built a smoke box on the top so we could smoke food and stuff like this. It was a very, very interesting but slightly obscure and weird game.
But I am hoping to run that. I'm hoping to run one of those. I don't know how well it would work over like a digital thing, because of the fact you need decks of cards and things that are available, and you've got to have a shared pot of chips. I'm sure you could do something over Tabletop Simulator if you really, really were bothered about it. But I might wait until we can actually get around a table, and I've got a few other friends who interested in playing some Deadlands, so we might try and sort out a session for that when we get back into normal, being able to see each other again.
Yeah, well that actually brings me to that question that I wanted to ask, which was, so of all the games that are out there that you know of, what is the one game that you're looking forward to playing, and what is the one game that you'd be prepared to run?
Well, so I'll say it straight away. Deadlands, obviously, I'm prepared to run that. And any game at the minute I'm looking forward to playing. I think getting back to the D&D campaign that we were running with Ian is probably...
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much looking forward to picking up that campaign again, because I was really, really enjoying running it. And the kind of the one of the reasons we're not doing it now is I just find this mechanism slightly. I'm lacking motivation. I think with everything that's going on, motivation has been a struggle for me just to do the little bit extra that it would take to do it over this. So I'm looking forward to running that again. So that'll be my running one. Playing, if you're going to run some Deadlands, that's me. I'm very much looking forward to playing that.
Gary?
I think for me, you know, I'll go back to the book that I got off eBay. I've already started planning an adventure. I've been on Wikipedia, looking at deep lore and background that you'll get more involved than you do on the StarWars.com website. I've already got the planet you're going to start in. I know where you're going to start, and it's perfect because it launches exactly in the right area that I want you to go to, the planet I want you to go to.
We do have choices, Gary, don't we?
You do have some choices. I want to give you your characters though. Just so it's good. This is your character.
You pick where we're going, you pick my character.
Your choice is either turn up and like it or you don't.
Because one of the problems for certain campaigns is that you end up with either, especially for Star Wars, you just end up with a lot of people where it's like, it's rebels on a mission, it's Imperials who've turned to the good side. It's pretty preset, but actually I've got some ideas how I want to bring this together, but I want to talk to you about that, and that requires us being in a room. You can't really do it in a setting like this, like Ian said. But yeah, I think running Star Wars definitely. I think, but what I'm looking forward to, I don't really know. I think lockdown's changing things for people. I just want to be gaming. I feel a bit distant from everything, obviously, but it's just not. As much as I'm planning ahead, I'm like, well, what are we going to do? Because we're going to want to do so much. It's going to be hard to get something started.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Mr. Lee?
Lee, what about you?
Well, I mean, Deadlands. We're just talking purely about roleplays. Yeah. Deadlands sounds fun. Can't wait for Star Wars and the limited choices we'll have. And,
You divvy.
Which dice are people carrying? So yeah.
You will have to be told. You are old.
Yeah. I mean, I think I need to do some reading. One of the biggest offences as a games master, and Stephen will tell you, is that I never bother to read the rules properly. So I'm going to do that with Paranoia.
Wow.
So I'm gonna read Paranoia. I'm going to take my time. I'm not going to set a date. I'm not going to promise anything. But yeah, let's not. I'd like to run a Paranoia for you guys sometime in the future.
Paranoia's all about being control and being evil, Lee. Are you capable of that?
No, it's not. It's about being logical.
Are you questioning the computer?
Exactly.
I play Paranoia to lose.
Oh, such a great
I
game.
burn my 9 clones as quick as possible and get the catalog.
Yeah, I've done
six.
all 6 clones in less than 15 minutes of genuine
Nice.
roleplay.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it without doing anything wrong and illegal, just doing everything exactly right.
I think for
And
anyone
getting killed for it.
Are you saying the computer was wrong then?
Well, of course not. It killed me 6 times.
righteously so.
Righteously.
I think the thing is one of those where anyone who's DM'd and had a terrible group of players or a group that's just gone off the rails, and I think we'll have all had it. When you run Paranoia as the GM, it's your time to sit back and relax and watch the terrified look on everyone's face. It's such a joy to run.
There was one game with Paranoia we played many years ago. I played it many years ago, where we took it deadly seriously. And playing Paranoia from a serious perspective and taking that joke side out of it, so you are in this computer-controlled dystopian future where you are clones and you are working to this end goal. It puts a really dark spin on the whole game.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre. Really enjoyable, but very bizarre.
So to wrap up then, Ben, you can answer your question that you set.
Yeah, so in terms of running stuff, you all know me. I've got a shelf of role-playing books, probably bigger than I need, and half of them will never see light. So I'm more than happy just to pick any book up and run. I've recently, I've got hold of Vampire 5th Edition recently, the new Cyberpunk, read Kickstarter,
Woof up. Do
Woof Up, and the Kickstarter, the Jump Starter for that, Star Trek again, etc. Yeah, all of these games. But I really want to play a Mutant Chronicles game because I've never played Mutant Chronicles. I've only ever GM'd Mutant Chronicles. It's the only game I've only ever GM'd and never played.
Oh.
And it's one of my absolute. It's up there with Cyberpunk 2020 as my favourite game.
As you've got quite a lot of experience at roleplay, Ben, and quite high expectations, I say, not me. I'm not running it.
I don't have high expectations.
I was.
I'm not going to screw this one
But
up
if
for
you skip it, if you're not very good, I'll tell you.
I mean, I'd have a go at running a Mutant Chronicles again because again, it was it's a system I really like now. I really like the universe, so I just have to reread all the books again. But
I'm also looking forward to being a bit part in Gary's narration.
let me read the.
Or I won't run it. I tell you. Jesus Christ.
So,
You're
Gary,
it says here that my character has to then shoot this guy over here.
and here's the series of dice rolls that you've already got. These are the numbers I need you to. No, sorry. Gary, I am looking forward to it.
Thank you. I've got 14 things where I've already planned where I depend characters as you. One of the things I like players to do is to be themselves. You inhabit you as that character rather than you become. I don't expect Laurence Olivier and John Gielgud and there's some method actor to rock up.
Just to quickly interpose, the Deadlands Kickstarter finishes in 8 hours. It wasn't last week. It's still got 8 hours.
Oh no!
Just to let you know, $10,000 goal, $531,911 pledged.
Nice. Well, I think given that my internet connection seems to be having a bit of a wobbly tonight, and we've managed to actually stay on top again and cover off the bits in around about the time that we allotted. So I think that's a good time to wrap up.
Yeah, well, I did just look at. I'd forgotten about the lovely dice box and the Deadlands Kickstarter. Sorry, I was.
Ian's face on Kickstarter. Every episode of this we do, Ian has to go on Kickstarter at one point just to get that face. It's glorious. And pledge.
So we will wrap up there.
Just make sure you're not doxing yourself there, Lee.
Lee's appearing from behind a microphone. So again, if you've stuck with us this long down our little trip down memory lane, looking at role players' first and favourites, it's been a nice little chat round for us, I think. As I say, I'm enjoying this, even for us. But if you like the sound of any of the role plays that we've talked about, you can probably still get copies of them kicking around. If you're looking second-hand bookshops, eBay, that kind of thing. If anyone's got a load of the old Deadlands books,
feel free to ask questions down there, and I'm sure one of us will know that we'll find an answer to it.
So jump into the Facebook group. Remember, there's the Facebook page, there's the Facebook group as well off the page if you want to ask questions about any questions you got about role plays, what's a good one to get, where's a good one to start, what's a good sci-fi one, etc. Hit us there. Obviously, they've also got Twitter and Instagram. And of course, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and notify on the YouTube channel. And if you do want to get this in your locals, go and visit the SoundCloud, which I'll put the link in the description for the SoundCloud, so you can actually listen to these as well as watch them. But I think that's been a nice little chatette, episode 4 of the Lockdown Cast. So I guess it's just for us all to say ta-ra, and then we'll see you on the next one.
Ta-da.
I'm not saying ta-ra, this isn't Gary's roleplay. I'll say goodbye.
Wow. You guys are dicks. The lot of yous. Look yourself. Wherever you are on the screen. Dicks.
Can I say goodbye now, Gary?
No, you're not allowed.
Okay.
Say goodbye, Ben.
Ta-ra.
Goodbye, Ben.